Day 1 of free agency has wrapped up, so let's take a look at some of the notable signings that went down, starting with the Carolina Hurricanes, who surprisingly decided to bring back both Ranta and Freddie Andersen. And I say surprisingly because I expect Kochetkov to be a full-time NHLer next season, but given both Andersen's and Ranta's injury history, Kochetkov will definitely get his fair share of games. And Ranta being on a cheap one-year deal makes it pretty easy to move him at the trade deadline. Carolina also made some insane new additions, signing Dmitry Orlov and Michael Bunting. Orlov last season was great, especially after he got traded to Boston, and he was one of the biggest names in this free agency class. And Carolina signs him to a 2-year contract worth $7.75 million per year. And Michael Bunting, coming off of 2 pretty good seasons in Toronto, signs for 3 years at $4.5 million per. These deals are fantastic for the Carolina Hurricanes. Bunting offers great forward depth and can play top 6 minutes if he needs to. And with there being rumors of Brett Pesce being traded, Dmitry Orlov slots in perfectly at the blue line and can help run the second power play unit behind Brent Burns. In a highly competitive Eastern Conference, the Hurricanes did a great job at improving their lineup for the upcoming season. Next, let's talk about the Nashville Predators, who made some very interesting signings. They signed Luke Schenn for 3 years at $8.25 million, Ryan O'Reilly for 4 years at $18 million, and Gustav Nyquist for 2 years at $6.4 million. With the Ryan Johansson trade and the Matt Duchene buyout leading into free agency, it signaled that they were tearing everything down and rebuilding. But these aren't the type of signings a team entering a rebuild makes. Barry Trotz said he wanted to change the culture, and these signings do accomplish that. Also, towards the end of the season, the Predators were weirdly competitive, despite not playing Philip Forsberg, Matt Duchene, Ryan Johansson, and Roman Josi. So with that in mind, given the additions that they made, and the fact that they have UC Saros in net, the Preds might still be a competitive team. A playoff team? Probably not, but they could somewhat be in the mix and end up playing spoiler for teams trying to get in. I'm fascinated to see how this team looks on the ice. The Anaheim Ducks signed 2 pretty big contracts. First was Radko Gudas for 3 years at $12 million, and the second being Alex Killorn at 4 years, $25 million. Anaheim has a ton of cap space and are rebuilding, making them one of the only teams that can afford to offer these types of deals to these aging players. And I don't really have a problem with any of these deals. Radko Gudas offers more physicality and is someone who can stand up for some of the Ducks' young players, which is something the Ducks didn't really have last season. And point-wise, Killorn had his best season last year and found a team that let him cash in. And while these contracts are definitely not going to age well, the Ducks probably aren't going to be good for a while. And by the time they are, these contracts will have expired, or at the very least have 1 year remaining. So again, I don't really see a problem with any of these contracts. The Detroit Red Wings made a bunch of signings. Some of them are great and some of them are less than ideal. Signing Justin Hall to a 3-year, $10.2 million contract is definitely a choice. Now, it's entirely possible that playing in a different system helps to improve his game, but nearly $3.5 million a year for 3 years is insane for someone who is ideally playing on your third pairing. But the Red Wings also made some pretty good signings as well, such as Daniel Sprong on a 1-year, $2 million deal. Coming off of a career season with 21 goals and 25 assists in 66 games, it was surprising that Seattle didn't qualify him and that he only got a 1-year deal. I think he's going to be a great addition to the Red Wings forward group, whether he's playing on the second or third line. Shane Gostisbehere also surprisingly only got a 1-year deal. He's a great addition to their defense and can play the right side despite being a left shot. James Reimer as the backup goalie is fine, and Klim Kostin on a 2-year deal is also pretty good. But JT Compher is probably their biggest acquisition, a 5-year deal worth $25.5 million. In the wake of Kadri leaving the Avalanche, JT Compher got more of an opportunity last season, and he played really well, putting up a career-high 52 points. And being 27 years old, this contract probably won't age too terribly, and it allows Andrew Kopp to be your third-line center instead of your second-line center, which is much more ideal. The Red Wings made a bunch of interesting signings, and I'm curious to see how this team performs next season. The Penguins also made a lot of interesting signings. Noel Acciari on a 3-year, $6 million deal is great. He brings physicality to the team, as shown with him being top 10 in hits last season, and top 4 in hits in the playoffs despite only getting into the second round. And he'll even score some goals every now and then. And Lars Eller on a 2-year deal is also a welcome addition to their bottom 6. But there's also some questionable contracts given out as well, such as a 5-year $27 million deal to Tristan Jarry. While the $5.4 million cap hit per season I don't think is terrible, but for 5 seasons it's questionable. It's not an atrocious contract. If it was a 3-year deal, that looks a lot better. But Ryan Graves on a 6-year deal with $4.5 million per is even more confusing. Not only do I think the cap hit is a bit high, but 6 years. Why? I'm very curious to find out what other team was in on Ryan Graves and what they were offering to where Pittsburgh had to go to 6 years to get the deal done. Don't get me wrong, Ryan Graves is a good defenseman, but not for that contract. The New York Rangers got some bargain deals. With Blake Wheeler being bought out, he signed a 1-year deal with the Rangers for $800K. Now while Blake Wheeler was definitely overpaid at $8 million, only $800,000 is an absolute steal for what he provides. And on top of that, Jonathan Quick on basically the same deal to be the backup to Igor Shesterkin, which is a pretty low risk deal. And on top of that, they also got Nick Bonino and Eric Gustafsson on real cheap deals to add more depth throughout their lineup. The Rangers got Blake Wheeler, Jonathan Quick, Eric Gustafsson, and Nick Bonino for the same combined cap hit as Justin Hall. Now we wait to see what they do with Vladimir Tarasenko and Patrick Kane. The Bruins lost Dmitry Orlov, Garnet Hathaway, and are going to lose Tyler Bertuzzi. But given their tight cap situation, they did pretty well. James Van Riemsdyk on a 1-year deal, Milan Lucic on a 1-year deal, Morgan Geekie on a 2-year deal, and Kevin Shattenkirk on a 1-year deal. These are all great short-term additions to their lineup. Now we still need to wait and see if Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci are retiring, and the Bruins also need to re-sign Jeremy Swayman, which if a team wanted to cause some chaos with an offer sheet, Jeremy Swayman is a prime candidate. I'm going to start going through these more quickly because it's almost 2 a.m. as I'm recording, and the video is getting kind of long. The Panthers signed Oliver Ekman-Larsson on a 1-year deal. OEL was definitely severely overpaid, but at a little over $2 million for 1 year, he should be fine. And Stolar should also be fine as Bobrovsky's backup, at least until Spencer Knight comes back. Arizona signs Jason Zucker to a 1-year $5 million deal. He'll probably put up a bunch of points and get traded at the deadline at 50% retained. Nick Bukestad's back, which is pretty cool, and Alex Kerfoot on a 2-year deal is also not that bad. Bowen Byram gets a 2-year extension from the Colorado Avalanche, which is great, especially at that cap hit, and they also signed Jonathan Drouin for 1 year. I'm interested to see how he plays there and if he can start to revive his career a bit. Also, it's kinda odd that they gave Miles Wood 6 years. Matt Duchene goes to the Stars on a 1-year deal, which gives the Stars one of the deepest forward groups in the entire league, and Duchene is a pretty solid replacement for Max Domi. The Ottawa Senators signed Joonas Korpisalo to a 5-year $20 million deal. Korpisalo had some rough years in Columbus, but last year played pretty well and played even better when he got traded to LA. Just like the Tristan Jarry deal, I think the cap hit is fine, but the 5 years I think is a bit too much for a goalie whose track record is as unpredictable as Korpisalo's has been. And to replace Korpisalo, the Kings signed Cam Talbot to a 1-year deal, as well as Dave Riddick, who played decently enough as the backup in Winnipeg. On paper, LA's goaltending leaves a lot to be desired. It's not bad, but it's not great, unless Phoenix Copley can really step up. The Islanders re-signed some players to questionable terms. Signing 35-year-old Semyon Varlamov to 4 years is questionable. Signing 30-year-old Scott Mayfield to a 7-year deal is questionable. Pierre Engvall on a 7-year deal is a little less questionable but still kind of odd. But Ilya Sorokin gets an 8-year extension, which is well deserved. The Leafs signed Ryan Reeves to a 3-year deal, and while a 3-year deal to a 36-year-old is not the greatest idea, Ryan Reeves does add some much needed physicality to this team, especially with Nola Chari and Luke Shen not coming back, and the cap hit is pretty reasonable. John Klingberg's on the other hand is not. 1 year for over $4 million. The Leafs let Eric Gustafsson walk, and he only signed for $800K. John Klingberg's not bad, but with a cap hit of over $4 million, with them still needing to re-sign Ilya Samsonov and finding replacements for the players they lost, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The Sharks signed Mackenzie Blackwood to a 2-year deal, and also traded for Anthony Duclair. Someone's gotta score goals for the Sharks, and outside of Couture and Hurdle, who else do they really have to do that? Duclair will probably score a decent amount of goals and get traded at the deadline. The Canucks signed Carson Soucy to a 3-year deal, and Ian Cole and Matt Irwin to 1-year deals. Carson Soucy is a great addition to their blue line, and Ian Cole is technically an addition to their blue line. They also signed Teddy Bluger to a 1-year deal, who I think will play pretty well on their 4th line. Max Pacioretty signs a 1-year deal with the Washington Capitals. Pacioretty only played 5 games last season before getting re-injured, which is just really unfortunate. This is a low-risk, high-reward deal for the Capitals. If he's able to come back and play at the level we know he can play at, or even close to it, this is going to be a great move for the Capitals. But given his age and recent injury history, that might not be likely, but I can hope. Laurent Brossoit signs back with the Winnipeg Jets. He played great for Vegas last year, especially in the first round of the playoffs. And if Connor Hellebuyck is getting traded, then he'll be the starter. So we'll see how that turns out. That is a recap of day 1 of free agency. Now obviously I didn't talk about every single signing because it's impossible to have an opinion on every single signing, but I talked about what I found to be interesting or noteworthy, and there's still a bunch of things left to be determined, such as where guys like Tarasenko, Max Domi, Patrick Kane end up, as well as potential trades for Alex DeBrincat or Connor Hellebuyck. But I hope you enjoyed this video and thank you for watching.